Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new HUED Talk. And it's our pleasure to be serving these talks on a monthly basis with experts of the industry in fields of innovation, design, digital transformation, and customer experience. And I would like to first invite all of you to follow our social media accounts so you can also get further updates on the next talks. And I would like to welcome our speaker of today, Mr. Mohammad Sear. Mohammad leads the digital government practice in the MENA region in Ernst & Young, and he's a champion of inclusion and diversity. He has also served in the UK government under 3 prime ministers. Mohammad has been sharing quite very interesting thoughts and insights in Harvard Business Review, and I have seen he has been also doing some other webinars for Harvard Business Review Arabia, and thought that would be a great opportunity to actually bring him in to also talk to the audience of HUED Talks. Thanks, Mohammad, for accepting the invitation.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Let me kick off by just sharing a quote that I thought of today, and you will see as we go through the presentation and discussion today why it's relevant for today. And I strongly believe that visionaries imagine and create new realities, disregarding a lot of what exists today. So they live in a different world, so to speak. They try to see beyond the challenges and complications of where we are today to look at potentially creating something which is much more appealing and user-friendly and fit for purpose for all of us, and particularly pushing the boundaries out. I want to also just give a bit of context of myself so you understand some of the things I'm going to talk about, the backdrop and background for these. I've been, you can say, in my career for almost 3 decades now. The first part of my career, or just over the first decade of my career, you can say, was in the UK government. And as mentioned by Mahmoud, I was had the pleasure and opportunity to work under 3 different prime ministers with very interesting dimensions to their personality and their vision. And I then pivoted into the private sector, working in industry and also in consulting. And the last decade, you can say, has been mainly in consulting, but pretty much focused on the government sector. So I started my career in the government sector, and I'm back in the space where I started my career, and I see myself more of a public servant today than ever before. The other thing is important for you to understand about myself before I go into talking about what I'm going to share is I'm driven by a simple purpose, and that purpose is to make a difference in people's lives. And that's why I believe being a public servant or advisor is the right place for me. And having worked in the UK, New Zealand, and Middle East for these 3 decades, being a citizen in these countries, living there, and also being like what I call an international citizen, who's traveled different parts. I have been experiencing how, as a citizen, government is interacting with its citizens and serving its citizens. And then, having worked in government, I've experienced that side of the being at that side of the table as well, and of course, as a advisor and consultant to senior leaders in government, I've experienced the policies and strategies that around the world governments are looking at to try and enable a better citizen experience or citizen-centric government model. So what I'm sharing with you is something that's been traveling with me for some time, and I've been building on it. And very important to also say that this is a perspective and it's a journey. What I'll share may or may not resonate with some people, or some people may feel, yes, this is something that we should be thinking about. The main purpose is really not whether this is the right model or something else is the right model, is really to start us thinking in a different way, because I feel our world has changed so much. So let me start with sharing one key message. We all are experiencing this, and I'm sure you all will agree with me that today our world has significantly changed. We are moving more and more towards doing everything that we were doing yesterday in silos, in independent ways, into one way of doing things, which is pretty much our laptop, mobile, or our tablet. And it's all happening, or starting to happen, in the online world. So our shift is profound, what we've seen over the last couple of decades. And it's also quite evident that it's not just a perspective, the numbers are backing this. If we look at average hour that we are spending as individuals who are a user of internet, is around 6.6 hours a day, which is a huge number. If we look at the number of users today in the world of internet, we talk about 4.7 billion. Now that's around half the population. But when you put another lens on that and think about how many people are in the infancy stage where they don't even have access, then, and you look at really who could have access, then the percentage probably rises to something like 70 to 75%, which is astonishing. If we look at how digital advertising is eclipsing traditional media, that means that more and more advertising is being done in the online space. So the reason why the advertisers are going there is because we are there. More and more we are going and using those channels. Otherwise, they would not look at that as a place to advertise. And if we look at social media itself, we're talking about 4.1 billion users at this point in time. And if we look at how much people are searching on the internet to buy things, from an e-commerce perspective, is quite high as well, 82% of internet users. So we are really changing the way we live, work, play, and do things. If we take a forward view and we look at what's happening or what is about to happen, we see a huge shift towards 5G connectivity. We see a huge shift towards connected devices. If we look at, for example, by 2030, we're talking about something like 15 devices per person. That's astonishing when we think about it. But when we think it's going to be a lot of connected devices which connect device to device, then you can understand why potentially 15 per person. But that's huge.
Mohammed, I want to give you a second to share your screen. So are
is it not coming through? Sorry.
No.
I thought.
But meanwhile, also for all the participants, if you have any questions, you can add them in the chat box, and then we'll be taking them one by one after the.
Give me 1 second. I don't know what happened there. It was presenting. Sorry, should have mentioned earlier. My apologies. So from the beginning, it was not showing?
Actually, no.
Okay, so in that case, I'm on slide, is it showing now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a very, very quick recap so that, and I'm not going to spend too much time, but very quickly so at least people have a view of it. This was a quote I shared earlier, and then I went on to talking about, how our world has changed. And then I'm just talking about some of the statistics, and I'm actually at this point. So if that's okay, I'll continue from here. So as we move forward and we see how things are changing, we are looking at a lot more connectivity. We're looking at a lot more interactions per person. something like 4,900 digital interactions per connected person per day by 2025. That's astonishing. You know, when we look at amount of data that's going to be created, amount of connected devices by 2025, you know, all of these things are growing significantly. And when we look at all of the indicators, you know, some of the key indicators, they all are pointing towards a growth. You know, for example, our annual growth rate of internet users is 7.5%. Our annual growth of social media users is even higher, it's about 12.3%. When we look at our digital education market, we're looking at that expanding significantly to 3.2 billion and etc. You know, I won't read through all of these, but you get the picture. The world has changed, is changing, and will continue to change. And, you know, the famous COVID. Can't have a talk today without bringing COVID into the picture. So what COVID has done has really put a spotlight on our changed world. It's not that our world changed during COVID. Of course, it's got accelerated, and we are now seeing governments, private sector, everyone starting to think about a different way of working. You know, we as an organization are thinking about a different way of working. So COVID-19 has really done two things, in my opinion. One is put a spotlight, and it actually has, you know, given a boost and, you know, looked at speeding up the whole journey towards the next phase of digital world. And when we zoom in governments as well, and it's not that governments are not doing great in this space as well. If you look at some of the key numbers from EGDI ranking, which is the EGovernment Digital Index from the UN, pretty much all are indicating towards more and more uses of digital. For example, 65% of UN members states now are in the high or very high category of EGDI from a maturity perspective. When we look at number of UN members that actually moved at the higher EGDI ranking in 2018, it was about 22%. Sorry, since 2018, so in 2020 was the survey shared. And 84% of UN member states are now offer at least one online transaction. So the travel of direction, even for government, is that way. Now, what's the issue? The issue for me is that we have a plethora of government access points. So this move towards, let's call it digital in government, has left us with a fragmented access. I don't believe anyone who is coming from a human-centric design perspective, or even, you know, thinking from citizen experience perspective, would want to create such a situation. Yet this is the reality in most countries. You have hundreds of fragmented mobile apps from government, hundreds of fragmented portals from government, hundreds of fragmented kiosks, contact centers, thousands, of kiosks and service centers, and hundreds of contact centers. So that's one part of the challenge. And I believe that challenge is because pretty much digital government and its predecessor, e-government, are both, in my opinion, a technology first play. And because of that, we have missed a trick, in my opinion. And secondly, if you want to fulfill a need, you cannot do that by going to one place. Even starting a business, you probably have to go to 6 or 7 or 5 different government agencies to truly start a business. Not get a license, start a business, you know. So you may get the license in a very simple, simplistic form from one government agency because the experience has been improved, it's digitized, and it's beautiful. But that doesn't start your business. You probably didn't have to go somewhere else, and eventually you are able to start your business. As an entrepreneur, you don't care getting a license. You want to start a business. You want it to be as simple and as easy to do. And finally, wanting to share is that all of this is also contributing towards the digital divide, because we have not, again, thought from a experience perspective. We haven't built in what I call inclusion by design. So thinking about who are all the personas or all the players that we are serving, and how can we make sure that they are not going to be in one shape or form disadvantaged. So what does this mean? For me, it means that we really need to think of a future digital, a future model that is fit for the digital era. And that requires us to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. Why do we do what we do today? Are these things even needed or redundant? Not a lot of the times we don't even know why we're doing it. If still needed, is there a better way of doing these, or should someone else do them instead of a government? And most importantly, what are we not doing today that we should be doing or could be doing to really fulfill a better life experience for our citizens? So what this means is, in my view, we need to really go beyond digitizing and make a paradigm shift by reimagining the role and model of governments. This means that we take a much more radical approach to thinking about the model of government, and think about one that is, in my opinion, built ground upwards and is citizen-centric at the core. We need to look at really what works in this digital area. With all the power we have today, all the benefits we have today, how could we structure a government model that will be much more responsive and much more connected and much more engaging for our citizens, and where our citizens can play a bigger role and a bigger part of that? And for me, it is really moving the needle from thinking digital to start thinking smart. And there's a reason for why I am saying we need to think of smart government. Firstly, the concept of smart. If we look at the definition of smart, it means having quick-witted intelligence. And I'm not using the word smart in the conventional way where we talk about technology, etc. For me, smart could mean that you are even just changing the business model, the operating model, to deliver better benefits. So quick-witted intelligence basically means two things: acquire and apply knowledge and skills, and the ability to think or respond quickly and efficiently. And I'm sure you all would agree that even as every organization, but particularly as a government, this is something that we would like our government to be like. So from a definitional perspective, and my apologies for it being very long worded, but I wanted to make sure that I encapsulate the true essence and put forward a view that is much more comprehensive and is not just about technology. So it's about, for me, a system that has the ability to constantly identify and predict and understand needs of its citizens before they even have figured these out. And then not just figure these out. So that means a lot of sense of being able to understand our citizens, the needs of our citizens through whatever channels we can and mechanisms, but then be able to convert this into intelligent insights that are actionable, that actually can make a difference in the lives of citizens. Typically, we as citizens want to be secure, want to be healthy, want to have a meaningful life, be content and fulfilled. And so if that's what we could be driving towards and thinking towards, then we all would be appreciative of the role of our governments in the world. But importantly, it should look at effectively and efficiently using all resources at its disposal and see how it can achieve its purpose, whether it's through people, natural resources, digital technology, etc., big data, advanced, all of these things could play a role. But absolutely should be constantly looking to question and challenge the status quo. That means good is never good enough. It's always pushing the boundaries. So for me, the government model has to shift from towards being more of an enabler than doer. Many governments are shifting in this direction. Others are doing a lot of things themselves. But I feel that need to move towards being more of an enabler and better connected to its core purpose of serving citizens. And there are 5 principles that I believe this future government model should be built around. Firstly, its core focus and main focus should be citizen life experiences. And I'll explain a bit more what I mean by that in a second. Data analytics should be its core. Its whole operating model should be built on that. We all know how important data is and how we can really drive meaningful insights to help us to serve better. The model should be ecosystem centered, not about I do everything myself. It should be about enabling an ecosystem, bring the best together in a connected way that is able to deliver much more value than we have on our own. And the emphasis should be digital by default. And I've deliberately kept digital by default, the 4th one, not the first one, because we need to start with a citizen. And if you want to start with a citizen, that means you need to have data to understand citizens' needs, etc. And you need to be able to have an ecosystem that can use the data to serve them. And of course, we all want it easy, so digital by default, but not only. And obsession must be with outcomes, not about outputs. We are focused too much on outputs, which actually have no meaning in the end of the day. So what does that mean? It means our relationship today between citizen and government is kind of like this. I, as a citizen, have to be aware of every agency that has a role to play in my life. And I need to understand, I need to learn how to navigate, I need to learn each one of them, how to access them, when do I get services, etc. So it's quite a complicated, and if you think about how many agencies there are typically in a country, they could be in the numbers of something like 280 to 300. When it's one government, do we really need to, as a citizen, remember 200, 300 different agencies, what they do, why they do, when they do it? So I'm proposing a model which is shifting towards what I call an uber simple, ultra convenient, and super fast way of government that shifts the burden of effort from the citizen to the government. And what that means is I'm introducing a new layer within the citizen and government agencies, which I call the citizen life experience management layer. I'm consistently being surprised to see how no government has one organization in government which is thinking about the life experiences of the citizens from cradle to grave. Why not we think about proactively as a government and design experiences that will be meaningful for us as individuals as we go through our journey? And this is not a one-off exercise, it's a continuous process because the environment changes, needs changes, etc. And we look at every possible experience, whether it's educational experience, whether it is business experience, whether it's becoming a family experience, etc. So that's the first thing. The second is it's about a full need. So that experience should be activated and enabled through not just the government sector, but also by engaging with the private sector and the third sector to do things that will create a better experience for the individual's lives. So proactively design and proactively manage the experiences of our citizens. And I've used the word citizen in a very broad way. It just means anyone who is in, whether they are business or individual. So, and then the second thing I'm saying, there should be the interface between citizen and the government should be one unified and single branded front end of government. Why do we need to have hundreds of different front ends of government to deal with when each one gives a different experience? And we should be looking to move towards a omni-channel experience with digital first, but not only, keeping in mind that we have many different kind of citizens who have different needs. Not everyone is digitally skilled or literate at this stage in time. Maybe in the future, everyone can do that. And then on the organization, private sector, NGOs, etc., there are policy and regulations that drive private sector and third sector to play their role in enabling the designed life experiences. So it's experience by design, the shift I'm saying we need to make. So the mindset has to go from technology first led to a experience first led approach if we want to activate such a vision of the future. I'll pause there and happy to have a discussion and share, take questions.
Thanks, Mohammed, for sharing your thoughts. That was really great, and I think I love the part with starting with the experience, you know, and and it seems like this is really a great focus for everyone, and a lot of people are trying to make it happen. And I always, you know, like when I'm discussing employee experience, and I'm not sure if any of the attendees here are from that field. You know, when we discuss employee experience, sometimes with like IT directors, etc., I always say, you know what, nobody really comes extremely fascinated to work today because you have an amazing gate pass services, you know, or,
Right.
Or something as such, you know. And when you get up in the morning, you don't say, you know what, I feel truly excited because there is a great passport department or something like that, you know. So they play different roles in life. And I loved, as you put the security part, you put also meaningful, and you put also fulfilling, right? So these
Correct.
are areas definitely that we are always looking for.
By the way, I took a lot of time to think about all of those words to ensure also they're not overlaps, you know, because often you can think, and each one has a different meaning, and happy to go into the meaning of each one. But I've tried to think from my perspective and conversations I've had with people, you know, what does good feel like, you know, and obviously security is always number one. And if you even look at the Maslow hierarchy of things, but this contentment at the end of the day could come from someone having, I'm just going to use a term, money, 1 billion, or it could come from $1. You know, contentment has no value, but contentment in terms of the money, but contentment I've seen in villages where they don't have anything, but they sleep extremely beautifully at night, you know, with no worries, no concerns. And I've seen, you know, millionaires, billionaires not having a good night's sleep. So it's just putting a different lens and perspective on things. And I definitely think it's government is a case study for designers, you know, how not to do things. And I believe, again, there's no bad intention from the government side. This is not, by the way, a dig at governments.
Yeah.
Being a public servant myself, I am very conscious of how policies and structures drive us in a particular direction. And unless there is a change comes from the top in terms of really taking a step back and saying, this makes sense. Oh, why are we not designing experiences for our citizens, which we enable through government services and private sector? Why are we not doing that? I mean, it's like a no-brainer to me. Why is no someone thinking of designing experience and trying to enable that? So it's a different approach. And I recently was doing a project for the Maltese government for their national digital strategy. And it was really nice to see that they took the advice and we were giving, which was to do that. This is, by the way, digital strategy for the country. They took the advice on it being persona led. We said, let's look at the personas whose lives you are trying to make a difference in, and let's define what is it that good is for them. You know, what are they looking for from their life? And then let's see how we as government could activate and enable that through digital technology. Totally different to how most governments are taking the approach of digital.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes people, since they are trying to elevate experiences or, you know, at least like relieve pains that go through normal processes, Sometimes that initial level is seen to be the experience design part, but I think it needs to go beyond that. I will start taking some of the questions. And the first question I see here is from Timani, how to encourage and motivate government decision makers to do what? To take similar points of views or to focus on experience. Can you, or if you want to?
I can answer it in a very simple way. Somehow we need to get our people who work in government to remember that before anything else, they're a citizen. And to always try and think from the citizen's perspective. I know it's difficult at times, and I know we all have roles to play. But at the end of the day, the whole government machinery, my humble opinion, is pointed in one direction, and that is serving the citizenry of the country, whether it is through building good infrastructure, whether it's by providing better services, by creating the enabling environment through policies, regulation, and stuff. It's not an easy task, because when you are driven by certain policies and your jobs are linked to certain KPIs, very difficult to break away from that. But it's about trying to, as much as we can, continue. To me, this is a movement. There's no time frame that this is going to happen and people all of a sudden a light bulb will come on and governments will change the way. But the encouraging thing is I'm seeing a lot of change in governments towards this direction, and moving a lot more towards taking a more experience-led approach. I'm just giving the term experience-led. And if you, I shared with you the paper that I wrote, and there is the article which was published. The basis of that also is from my, you can say, observation was happening in the EU, where the EU is starting to debate and discuss that technology is not solving many of the problems, so they need to take a different approach towards solving problems. So they are shifting towards also a, let's call it a more purpose-led approach, or first, then technology. And that's encouraging. You know, EU is made up of many countries, and we all aspire and follow and use European countries as benchmarks. And the same I'm seeing in most of the countries in the Western world. And what's more encouraging is I'm starting to see that in this part of the world as well. Many things I can't share due to confidentiality, but the travel of direction is all towards changing the way we do things. And I'm hoping it will continue in that way.
Thank you, Mohammed. There is a question from Malak and asking for a bit of elaboration. If this is what you're proposing is a redefinition of public administration.
It's kind of. So I'm not saying that everything that we're doing today is redundant. What I'm saying is that we really need to reimagine, rethink, because so much has changed how we operate today. Typically, what we do is when we look at digital projects, and this is not, I wouldn't say everywhere, but I would say by and large, the approach they're taking is we have a process, how can we digitize this process? We have a product, how can we digitize this product? And I'm saying we need to start thinking differently. I'll give you an example. You used passport. Do we need a passport? I believe passport is a product that has passed its sell-by date. Why? Passport was created how many hundreds of years ago as a way of identifying you as an individual who says, I come from Japan, UK, wherever, and I have a visa to enter your country, or I have the right to enter your country because I have a visa on arrival. Now let's think about it. What were they doing? When you gave a physical passport, they were looking at it and looking at the picture and trying to identify you and say, oh, is this the person who or she is saying? Today, in most countries, they scan your passport, right? And they get the data on the screen. They may still do some kind of verification, but it's starting to move in a direction where you have become your own ID. So if I'm my ID and you can recognize me and verify me through biometrics, why do I need to carry a document that says a passport or an ID? So it's that kind of mindset. I'm not saying, by the way, let's get rid of it, because that requires country to country collaboration. It's not, but in a country, you can start thinking about it. If you take Estonia as an example, they have a digital ID. This is probably one of the countries which is the most advanced when it comes to their thought process when it came to ID. When you pass your driving test and now you have the right to drive, they don't give you a driving license. They add it onto your digital ID that you have the right to drive. So if you get stopped in the street for some reason, they check your digital ID and they say, okay, he or she has a driving license, so it's okay. So it's thinking differently, it's thinking outside the box and trying to think, what purpose is really a passport looking to solve for? And is there a different way of doing that? So come back to the public administration. You need to think about what purpose is public administration looking to solve for, and how can we do that in this digital area? If it's the same, great, we move on. If it can be different, let's reimagine that.
Okay, great. I have a question for you. I mean, what you're proposing is quite ambitious, and I see the group that's here, and some of them come from the design world, and some actually are working in government entities, and then you're getting them excited, but then they have to meet the reality tomorrow morning. But until then, let me take the question from Arish, and she's saying, what I find myself thinking about is that we have different ministries that have many channels, and as citizens, we interact with different channels from different ministries. The current situation doesn't provide an optimized and hopefully orchestrated experience. What do you think about this?
Yeah, and that's what I'm basically absolutely recommending, that we move towards, number one, a single front end of government. It fascinates me why we still require that, because if we move to one front end of government, what does that do? Multiple benefits. Number one, as a user, I know I don't need to go anywhere but this front end, whether it's digital, physical, contact center, whatever, that is the place I go. So you first of all make the most simplified, you can say, first of all, you simplified enormously for all of the citizens, that I don't need to think about where do I go for government services. It's just this place I go to. So that's one. Number two, think about all of the cost of running multiple different portals or apps. And are we as government in the business of running technology? Is that what our job is? Our core business is about serving and doing our job that we are mandated to do. If it's about education, if it's about health, if it's about your passports, that's what our job is. Yet all of us seem to want to become a tech company, because we are investing more and more in technology in government and competing also with the private sector. And what we are doing also, by doing more and more technology development ourselves, we are actually taking away opportunities from the private sector. We are taking away opportunities to develop our own economies. Estonia is a great model of where they have looked at ecosystem building. So because maybe they didn't have the funds that we enjoy in this part of the world, they had to look at very innovative ways of doing all they wanted to do, but with like a budget on a shoestring. So the benefit they're reaping today, because today all over the world, most countries want to go and study Estonia and benchmark with Estonia. And then when you benchmark and you meet the government, so government to government, they say, yeah, this is what we've done great. By the way, it's company A, company B, company C that you could hire them. So their companies are being hired by governments to do many of their services, because other than some critical service development, everything was kind of in the private sector. So That's the shift I think we need to make. And it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It will happen. There are examples of it. Estonia is a great example. UK is a great example where they only have one hand of government. Again, they are on a journey. It's not that they have reached the best at the peak. There is a long way to go, but it's about a travel of direction. How are we truly wanting to serve our citizens? If that's the case, then I rest my case. It's why would you want to complicate access to government services when it's one government?
Great. Well, I have a question, but then I see that my boss also has a question, and I'll give him precedence here. So, so Engineer Samuel Hussain is asking, dear Mr. Sear, what is the current closest government example to the model you presented?
I would say you will find components of it in different parts of the world, but you will not find the whole. So that's encouraging. So if I look at life experiences, I put life experiences at the top level. Nobody in the world today, in my opinion, is doing that. There is only one government that is starting to experiment with that, and it's a government I work with. But if I look at the next layer under life experience, in the hierarchy, I have what's called life moments or events. Many governments are working on life moments and life events. They are starting to, for example, and I call life event like starting a business. So many governments are starting to look at connecting the different government agencies together, bundling them together into one service, which is starting a business. And one other thing is happening, which I didn't cover in my talk, but again, it's about it's kind of implicit. So when I talk about shifting the burden from the citizen to the government, that means governments need to become proactive and predictive. They need to predict your needs and then trigger off the associated actions. So take, for example, passport. Government knows when the passport is expiring. Few governments are doing this, not many. They will send you a notification and say, hey, Mahmoud, your passport is expiring. Would you need to renew? They don't go as far as where I would like it to be, which is you get a push notification. Your passport is expiring. Would you like to get it renewed? Swipe right to say yes, left to no. I'll do it in my own time. You swipe right. The next question they ask you is, are all your details up to date or anything changed? If it's yes, they are the same. You press yes, and they say, thank you very much. You'll have your passport in 7 days. That's, to me, that's what I call proactive. Predictive means that I have data about your travel history, which governments mostly have anyway. And I have permission from you to use your data. So I know that Mahmoud's passport is not expiring till maybe 2 years from now. But Mahmoud has been doing almost a trip every week. So my analysis tell me that potentially you run out of pages because you've been going to countries where they stamp your passport, not just scan and let you in electronically. So I reach out to you and say the same thing. I understand your passport is not expiring, for maybe 2 years, but you've done so much travel. Just wanted to check if you have enough pages, or would you like me to send you a new passport? Now, I'm sure all of us would love to have that kind of government service, right? And then another thing which is happening is connecting to triggers. So you get married, and in many cases, if you are female, and nowadays males also, you may decide to change your names. A female may decide to change it to the husband's last name, or both husband and wife may decide to take each other's name, and you have a double barrel name. But what does that do? A marriage, change of name, triggers a need for many of your documents to be updated. Your passport, your driving license, what have you. So why do I need to go and individually get these updated? Why cannot the intelligence come into play and it triggers off and says, hey, congratulations, you got married, because they did the marriage certificate, would you like us to send you updated documents? And which type of name would you like it? No, I'm okay with it. Or yes, and give me in my husband's name, or give me in my wife and husband. That's a different model of government. And that can only happen, in my opinion, if you centralize the thinking, thought process around experiences. So birth, again, is another one where we've seen a lot of. New Zealand was actually the first one, in my opinion, that I know of, actually just started the whole concept of life moments. And they kicked off something called Smart Start as a service, which is for new parents, basically, for mothers who are going to have a child. They connected many services and information, and proactively pushed information to you and your rights, and telling you what you can claim for and what you can't, and what information. So that's what I'm saying, that the government needs to take the burden away from the citizens, because technology allows that to happen. So why are we not leveraging it to the best?
Great. And let me say that, Mohammed, I mean, like everyone that has actually been interested and came over tonight is a sort of change agent. They could be like I don't know, a designer or someone responsible for some sort of transformation or something, working at the government entity or consulting for the government entity. Now, what can they tomorrow or, this month or the near future actually do? I mean, they get faced with a lot of realities. Some of them are like an element of firefighting or different views on change. Yeah, some are strategic, some are tactical, etc. And then they want to do the change.
So my one request to everyone is, as you said, they are change agents. Carry the torch and talk about. If you believe in this, you don't need to, but if you believe in this in your own way, you may have other perspectives, other ideas. The concept is about driving governments to be citizen-centric. That's the philosophy. If you believe in that philosophy, do whatever you can with your limited or capacity, power, influence, whatever, and don't be worried about whether someone is going to listen or not listen. Our job is not to look for the results. Our job is to put out what we believe in and hope that maybe even 1% of that could be taken forward and may inspire someone, and we've done our job. That's all we should do. We cannot force. We can keep on talking about it, and it becomes a force, and it's every drop in the ocean, or as they say, every drop eventually creates an ocean. And that's my own personal philosophy, and I talk about it, and I keep on writing about it, speaking about it, because I believe that's all we should do. And then, of course, in our own capacities in work, when we are meeting with people who have the right influence and level of responsibility to drive a change, do so. And if you are a citizen of whichever nation you are a citizen, ask your governments to think about this. Why are they not thinking about making services much more connected and simple?
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And I have personally, I mean, in some of the projects consulted for like excellencies and stuff, and it is sometimes quite tough if you have to all the time alternate between the realities of today and putting down fires, right? And being very reactive and actually solving problems, and also looking down the future. And I remember in one of the cases, we came up with a model that somehow inspired from humans. So basically, if an organization is like a human, then that could be very sick. And we call these type of projects emergency projects. So, they're about to die or something like that. And then much better, then they are fitness project, much longer, etc. And then longer term is wellness projects. So we had this emergency fitness wellness. Correct. And I think what was good about that was aligning ourselves and everybody in the organization on what to expect within this time frame when we're trying to solve this problem. Is this very immediate, be cutting corners, doing something to put the fire, down, or is it something that is longer term? But I totally agree that for all of these, we have to, to put the experience and the citizen up front, and then try to steer forward?
It has to. Look, the battlefield for the private sector still in this decade, and I think the next decade, is experience, right? Every company is trying to improve and compete with each other based on experience to its customers. So why, when government's main customer or the only customer is citizens, we are not investing in citizen experience? Why don't we have a ministry for citizen experience? Why don't we have a agency, department? Why is it that technology is driving all of this? Look at digital government around the world. In most cases, it's a technology organization that is driving it. And they are doing experience on the side. It should be the reverse. Do you see any organization, well, many organizations I do, where technology is driving the business? Yet in governments, we are, and by the way, don't get me wrong, I mean, without technology, nothing happens. And I have all due respect and really many friends, many colleagues who are technologists and driving this change. But you need a different mindset. You need experiences to be designed, experiences to be imagined. You need connectivity with your citizens on a regular basis. Any project that we are doing nowadays, if you're going to do a citizen-centric, or let's say human-centric design, you will start obviously with your users. Whether it's product, you start with the users, understand your users. Even startups, we are encouraging startups to go understand the user market before you start thinking that actually there's a product and viable product for this. So why, when the only customer by and large a government has, which is its citizens, that we don't have this layer, is missing? And I think there is a need for us to invest in this and think differently. And of course, it's a collaborated effort. Technology partners need to be there, but I just feel that we just need to shift the balance towards being more experience-led, and then, of course, bringing the right technologies and stuff. Because sometimes the answer is not technology; it's an operating model change.
Yeah, I agree. I want to ask you, Mohammad, to give us your final thoughts, and I follow your daily thoughts or thought of the day on LinkedIn, and
yeah. So
I think you get more followers after this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, feel free. I mean, social space is where we really find the opportunity to interact, and I love the social space because it really is I would call it a democratization model, right? So everyone becomes equal, and you are able to, the access to each other becomes much more possible than in the real world. Very difficult to connect sometimes with different people. And of course, it's not always easy to respond to everyone, but that's a space which I really am keen that I connect and talk to people and share views, and want others to share views. But that's one thing. Really, let's make the most of this space that we have and the advantage it gives us. Number two is, don't worry about the result. If you believe in something, just go for it and leave the rest to the forces that are beyond us, and if it is to happen, it will happen. And finally, I mean, I put out a quote today also, which I shared at the beginning. I really believe in that. You don't need to, if you want to be visionary, you need to think beyond the status quo. You need to come up with new realities. And I would like to, in the end, share one. I don't know, people, if you know Guy Kawasaki. I really love some of his advice, and right now there's a series going on in LinkedIn with very short 1 minute, 2 minute blasts of his wisdom. And one stuck with me recently, which I would like to share, which is very powerful, at least to me. He narrates a story. He basically says, you don't need to be a Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, or Richard Branson to make a dent in the universe. You can make a dent in the universe by just helping one person. And I'll give you the context to why he said this, so that you understand why what he said is so profound. In his life story, he was sharing that when he was a student, young, in primary, his teacher saw potential in him. And he was going to a mediocre primary school where his teacher felt he didn't have the right environment for him to grow. So she decided to call his parents in and share this with his parents. And as a result of that, his parents took on board her advice and shifted him to a private school. Because of being in the private school, allowed him to get into Stanford. Because he was able to get into Stanford, he met with someone there who was very close to Steve Jobs. And that allowed him to get a job in Apple. And as he says, the rest is history. So it may seem you are just helping an individual in a very small way, but what has he done in his career for the world and what he continues to do? Obviously, you need those kind of silent soldiers to make a difference in the world, to enable other people to make a difference in the world. So it stuck with me, and frankly, it's one of the things that drives me. It doesn't matter, any small thing can make a big difference. You don't know, so don't not try. It's my message.
Thanks, Mohammed, for coming over virtually today. And I mean, as much as we have had these private chats before, it's my pleasure that everybody is joining us today for these talks. I would like to invite everyone to give us their feedback in the comments in the chat box about the talk today, and also if there are other topics you would want to hear more about in the future. And we are looking forward to see everyone in the coming HUED Talk.